Okay, so let's get started. This is lesson 3.1, which means it is unit 3, lesson 1. That's what everything is going to be going forward. Just look for the first number and the lesson after. Anyway, let's start with distributive property. This is nothing really new, but it gets a little more complex with this unit. So we're going to look at question number 1 here. We see that it says 3, and then in brackets or parentheses it says 2x minus 4. So we know, because we're super smart, that the number outside must be multiplied to everything inside the parentheses. So treat it like a basket. We got 3 baskets full of this, so by the end of it, it should make sense that we have a total using our little rainbow task that we have there. Again, don't quote me on that. Don't tell anybody I called it the rainbow method. But here we go. So we know now that on the next line this should equal 3 times 2x gives us 6x, and 3 times, this is not 3 times 4, this is 3 times negative 4, so that would be negative 12 there all together. Treated as one whole unit here, negative 4, not just minus 4. Okay, so that one's there. Next, 4x times x plus 2. And in this way, we have a little bit of a different trick here, because next to, invisibly, if you put on your secret nerd mathematician glasses, the exponent for this x is 1, and that's 1. But when we multiply these things together, it's like you actually added the exponents. So rainbow method still applies, but in this instance, it is 4x squared plus, and then again 4x times 2 would give you 8x. A little bit different, so keep paying attention to those exponents. 1 and 1. You'll also see 1 and 1 here, and 1 and 1 there. So keep that in mind, and it'll come to you with practice. The same method would apply if it said 4x squared times x, and in that you would get 4x cubed. So number 3 here, I've got negative 2x times 3x first, and then negative 2x times negative 4. Let's just divide that there so that it's clear. So negative 2x times negative 2x times 3x will give you negative 6x, but then you got to pay attention to those exponents, squared, plus, because it's going to be negative times a negative, negative 2x times negative 4x should give me positive 8x. And when I say should, I mean definitely does. And I'll do the next one in green just to, because my handwriting's a little too big today. All right, so now I have negative 5x times positive 6x, which gives me negative 30x. And then I go, wait a minute, exponents invisibly, even though they're not there, but they are there, there's a little 1 and a 1. So I add my exponents together, and I'll get negative 30x squared. Now I do negative 5x times positive 7, and that gives me, you guessed it, negative 35x. Pretty easy so far? Okay, so just to walk you through the examples, and you'll see this on the solution page on D2L if, one, my handwriting is too disgusting to look at, or if you're not copying this down as you go. But very simply, x times x is x squared. Makes sense, right? X squared times x is x cubed. X cubed times x equals x to the power of 4, or you can make up any number. This could be x to the power of 4 times x to the power of 5, and what would you think you'd get? I feel like Dora the Explorer here. It's going to be x to the power of 9, because all you do is add the exponents together, which makes sense because you should know that x squared is really, that's going to be ugly, x times x, and that's x to the power of 1. So that's saying x times x times x, which you know is also x cubed. So the math checks out. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? If that just melted your brain, I'm sorry. So, distributive property, we reviewed it, we're done. We added that little advanced method of paying attention to the exponents. On the next part of this note that you definitely printed off or you're at least copying down into your notes, it says find two numbers whose product and sum are as indicated. Product and sum are just fancy pants words for numbers that you multiplied together and numbers that you added together. Mathematicians, for some reason, like to make you feel stupid, so they use bigger words than they need to. So, what two numbers did I multiply together to get 8? And what two numbers, those same two numbers, did I add together to get 6? So think really hard and think, something times something gives me 8, but those same two numbers, when I add them together, would give me 6. So for this first example, you'll see it would be 4 and 2, right? Because 4 times, I don't know if you can see my cursor, so let's just switch to the laser pointer. 4 times 2 gives me 8, and 4 plus 2, last time I checked, still gives me 6. All right, so we're going to just have these numbers. We'll divide that. Now 30, product of 30. So two numbers, when I multiply them together, give me 30, and when I add them together, give me 11. Okay, so you need to know your multiplication table for this. If you don't, pull it up on Google. You've got the internet at your fingertips now. Okay, so that would mean 5 and 6. When I multiply them, they give me 30. When I add them, I get 11. Makes sense? Negative 8. Oh, I've already thrown you a curveball. Oh my goodness. Okay, so negative 8. I need to find two numbers that I multiply together to get negative 8. And what do I know so far about the rules of negative and positive numbers? Well, I know that one of them has to be negative, and this one has to be positive. So this one has to be positive here. This one has to be negative, because a negative times a positive gives you a negative. Positive times a positive gives you a positive, and a negative times a negative gives you a positive. All right, so for this instance, we know that this is going to be negative. I'm going to say it's negative 4. And negative 4 times 2 gives me negative 8. Let's see if I add those together. Negative 4 plus 2 gives me negative 2. That makes sense. So far, we're good. Okay, how about this one? Negative 10 and negative 3. So two numbers multiplied together give me negative 10. Two numbers added together give me negative 3. I'll run through your multiplication table to what numbers give you 10. So that should be 5 and 2 is probably the first thing in your mind. All right, so I know one of them has to be negative and one of them has to be positive. So negative 5 and 2. Let's just double check. So negative 5 times 2, oops, that's my laser pointer. Negative 5 times 2 gives me negative 10. Negative 5 plus 2 gives me negative 3. So far, checks out. But let's see. Let's try it a different way. Let's try and flip the negative and the positive and see if we still come out with the same answer, just so that you're not too worried. Let's say we did negative 2 and positive 5. Okay, so negative 2 times positive 5 still gives me negative 10. Negative 2 plus 5 instead of minus would give me 3. So I think we're still good there. Or are we? Wait a minute. Oh, okay. So this, you can see, matters. The addition matters. Let's move on. Let's go back to blue. All right, so we have a product. Two numbers multiplied together give you 18, positive 18. Two numbers, when you add them, give you negative 9. So let's see. We can do 3 and 6 seems to make a lot of sense in my head right now, because I know that 3 plus 6 gives me 9, and I know that 3 times 6 gives me 18. And all these skills are building to something, so if you think this is a little too basic, it does build to something way more complicated soon, so stay tuned. All right, so here I've got -6, because if I add them together, it has to be negative, right? So these are both going to be negative. And if I multiply them together, it's going to give me a positive, right? Multiply together gives me a positive, add them together gives me a negative. That means they both have to be negative here. 21 and -10, following that same logic, add them together. When I add them together, it gives me negative, so that has to be negative and negative to keep things simple. So there are some exceptions, I'm sure, but to keep it simple right now, when it's negative here and positive here, they should both be negative. Okay, so that's this part of the chart. And the last page, or sorry, last section of that one page that you have, it says, fill in these factor trees, always fun, and then write the prime factors. So what is a prime factor? First of all, what's a factor? Factors are any numbers that you multiply together to get a product. There's that fancy pants word again. So that's the answer to a multiplication question, right? So two numbers that you multiply together. So you can see here, something times 3 gives you 57, right? So let's figure this out. So, and then what does it mean to be prime? If you think back to elementary school, prime numbers are anything that is divisible by only 1 and the number itself. Okay, so that the first prime number is 2, and then from there you would have things like 3, 5, 7, and so on. Right? I'll post a video of a guy reading all the prime numbers for about 3 hours. I really hope that none of you watch all of it unless you're that bored under lockdown. Anyway, so 3 times something, this is the something, gives me 57. So that would be 19. So these are my prime factors. I can only divide 3 by 3 and 1, and I can only divide 19 by 19 and 1. Same thing here. So let's move on to this next one. 24 is broken down into 4 and something else. So 4 times 6 gives me 24. And 6 can then be broken down into 2 times 3. And 4 can be broken down into 2 times 2. So that means the prime factors here are 3 and 19, and the prime factors here are 2 times 2 times 2 times 3, or 2 to the power of 3 times 3. It's kind of ugly. There we go. Okay. Moving on here, we got 40. 2 times something gives me 40. 2 times something gives me 40, and that something would obviously be 20. And 20 is not a prime number because you can break that down further. So 10 times something, which is 2. So 2 is a prime number here. 2 is still a prime number here. And we can see, oh my goodness, the 2's just keep going. So that would give me, let's see, 10 is broken down into 2 times 5, very simply. So prime factors on the bottom. You've got 3 and 19. You've got 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. And you have all the prime numbers here. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. Okay, so those are prime factors that give you a product. This is a product. That's a product as well. Okay. So again, it might not make sense just yet, but all of these skills will build towards something far more complicated, or at least complex. You can all do this with a little practice soon.